recall in my project proposal, I initially wanted to make a tourbillon clock. Before I started making my models, I decided it was a good idea to print off some that people have already made. It appeared though that their printers had a much higher tolerance than mine could. So I quickly scrapped that idea. I stumbled across the YouTube channel of JBV Creative. He has several clock designs that he's 3D printed himself. He sells a pendulum style clock, which uses a deadbeat escapement, not the tourbillon one. A deadbeat escapement requires much less tolerances than a tourbillon, and in theory could be 3D printed. One of my favorite parts about this clock was that the whole thing wasn't encased. It was all shown and you were able to see how the gears were working. So I purchased his files and I went to printing. In total, there was a little over 50 parts and took about 100 hours of printing. After the prints were done, I needed to purchase a few extra things: screws, washers, and bearings. And lying around in my house, I had twine and a 5-pound weight. The assembly was much harder than 3D printing the parts. It required very fine detail, especially needing to keep 50 parts together. You couldn't over-tight or under-tight, and you had to make sure everything was spinning properly. After the assembly was done, it was time to get the clock up and running. Unfortunately, this project was a fail. I couldn't get the clock to work. I've emailed the creator of the clock and also joined Discord discussion pages on troubleshooting this specific clock. After going back and forth with the creator and the people on Discord, I couldn't find a sufficient solution to my problems. I'm going to show you the clock now and explain how it should work and why I couldn't get it to work. This is the clock after full assembly. As I mentioned before, it runs off of a deadbeat escapement. The clock is mounted to the wall by 4 wood screws and 3D printed parts that went on. As you can see right here, this part is the escapement. It uses a pendulum to tell how long a second is, and it gets its power from a 6-pound weight. As we can see by the black rings, this is how we were able to tell time. First, to set the hour, you simply move the hand to what time it is. Let's say it's noon. Then, the middle ring is the minutes. Simply turn this, which is called the cam, until it's your desired time. The third ring is for the seconds. Now I never set up the second hand because I was too busy troubleshooting my problems. To power the clock after it's been used, simply turn this clever crankshaft until your weight gets all the way up. As soon as there's no more string on this gear and the weight is dropped to the floor, you have to rewind it. The rest of the gears are a clever system of different ratios to power the hour, minute, and seconds. Theoretically, if this was working, the pendulum would move back and forth, turning the escapement clockwise. This created clockwise motion would then power all the other gears. As you can see at the bottom of the pendulum, there are screws or any type of weight that would keep the pendulum in motion. This, however, was my problem with the clock. The pendulum wouldn't stay in motion and wouldn't keep the escapement turning. No matter where I put the weight, the amount of weight, or how long the pendulum is, the clock just doesn't seem to be running. However, I have not quite met defeat yet. I will keep researching and keep experimenting until I find a sufficient design. The time frame may be between a few days and a few months, but whatever it is, I will keep driving at it. I am very disappointed in this outcome, and I really hope that I could have shown you guys the working clock. At the end of this video, I will show some pictures, including what the clock looked like before assembly, and my creative twist on this clock, which include different dials. If it would be working, the clock would only vary a few seconds for every hour. This would make it a very, very precise 3D printed clock. I don't fully consider this a defeat, however, because I have learned so much along the way. I have learned several different escapements, how clocks work, and how to do the math for figuring out gears. This is a picture of all the parts laid out before they were assembled. And this isn't even including all of the parts that were broken or lost during the assembly. And you can really see the size of them, how some of them were very small and some of them were pretty big. This next picture is 3 different hands or needles that I designed that point at the number of the time it is. And this last one is 3 different dials that I designed to be put onto the clock. And with this one and the last one with the hands, I would love to show you what they look like on the clock, but unfortunately, being able to replace what I have on the clock now means that I would have to take apart the whole entire clock. And like I mentioned before, it took hours to assemble it. So I wish I could, but it's unrealistic. Also, I would like to mention as a side note, and it could also count for the creativity, is for the weights on the pendulum. I actually used one of the Tinkercad assignments with the box that had the twisted cap on it. I drilled a hole in the bottom of it, and in the model that I showed on my clock right now, It doesn't have the cap on it because I was messing around with the different weights, but it's kind of a cool way that I was able to use that.